ladies and gentlemen. What can I say? This is my, well, if you don't count my blocked videos, this is my 1000th video. And yeah, it's been quite a journey ever since I started making YouTube videos. And you know me, for every 100th video, I will make something special. And this is my 1000th video, so this is extra special. I've been waiting to make this video for a very, very, very long time. For years, actually. Because today I will be reviewing what may be my favorite album of all time. Radiohead's Kid A. Wow. We have arrived. So I have been a huge Radiohead fan in the year 2016, and I have always wanted to do a review on every single one of their albums, but I don't want to review their albums right off the bat, even though I already reviewed three of their albums. And this is because I want more subscribers before I review this album, so that more people will know how much I love this album. And I guess this is enough to get me to review this album. So Radiohead is a band formed in Croydon, London, back in the 1990s, and it consists of vocalist and producer Tom York, lead guitarist Ed O'Brien, Johnny Greenwood, who arranges the instrumentals and is also a guitarist as well as a production genius, the bassist Colin Greenwood, and drummer Phil Selway. And they are five very, very, very talented musicians. And they are Radiohead. And Radiohead, they have not made a single bad album. Even their worst album is actually not bad. The album released in 1993, Pablo Honey, is actually not a bad album at all. Yes, it's not a very inventive, not a very creative album. In comparison with other albums that Radiohead had done, Pablo Honey is easily the most boring and the least interesting, but still, as far as 90s alt rock goes, this album is not bad at all. And then they have The Bends, which is basically a more upgraded version of Pablo Honey, and it's so goddamn underrated. I really don't know why is The Bends so underrated, but there are so many great songs. I mean, yes, it is still pretty much meat and potatoes 90s alt rock, but still, tracks like Planet Telex, My Iron Lung, Fake Plastic Trees is absolutely beautiful and humbling, and the album ending, Street Spirits Fade Out, is so dark and chilling. The Bends is a masterpiece, but do you know what's even more of a masterpiece? It is OK Computer, released in 1997. OK Computer is where they sort of reinvent their sounds, while yes, they're still sticking with the 90s alt rock style, but OK Computer is slightly more experimental, and they sort of stick with one theme that is just about very repetitive, boring life. And with this concept, with this theme, they made one of the most powerful and depressing albums in history. And OK Computer got ranked #1 best album in RadioMusic.org for a lot of reasons. And this album is near perfect. In fact, I would argue that this album is simply straight up perfect, at least in my eyes, in that every single track is amazing. Every single track is unique, yet they are powerful. They hit hard. Tracks like Climbing Up the Walls, the explosive ending, sends chills to my spine. But do you know what song sends chills to my spine even more? Exit music for a film. The album opening, Airbag, is an absolutely stellar, refreshing album opening. Karma Police is the track that got me into Radiohead, and it is so beautiful, and Paranoid Android is a multifaceted masterpiece with such animated performances and writing, and the structure is just genius. The album ending is just absolutely depressive and dreary. The track Lucky, the guitars on that track, oh yeah, and also Electioneering, not a bad track. Even the interlude, Fitter Happier, is a great interlude that conveys such depressing emotions. And OK Computer, I just can't stop saying good things about this album. But do you know what album I like even more? I know it's a tough competition, but Kid A takes the cake. Kid A, released in the year 2000 on October 2nd, is probably my favorite album ever. Probably. I have, ever since the year 2016, I have fallen in love with this album, and not a single album have topped this. Not one. This album has 10 tracks, but each and one of them are totally different. Each and one of them tell a different story, have a different vibe, have different sounds and musical styles. But yet, it doesn't sound like a mess. This album actually has a pretty good flow, and the production on this album is so creative, and there are so many layers of instrumental ideas and production ideas on this album that the more you listen to it, the more you'll find from it, because this album is like an onion. There are so many layers to peel, and each time you listen to it, you learn something new about it. Like, oh, this little secret drum percussion in the background, oh, this little guitar lick, oh, this and that, this and that. The vocals by Thom Yorke is fantastic. I mean, Thom Yorke is one of my favorite musical artists ever. His vocals, it's really, really powerful in that he isn't afraid to show vulnerability. He isn't afraid to show weakness, and this is one of the reasons why Radiohead really resonates with me, especially in the year 2016. When I went through a lot of tough times emotionally, Radiohead really got me through it, and Radiohead is a band that has a special place in my heart. The performances are fantastic. A lot of people overlook Phil Selway, but his drums are really tight and really nice. Colin's bass is fantastic, and Ed O'Brien's really charismatic guitar playing is certainly a highlight on the album as well. And what can I say? The versatility of this album is truly phenomenal. I mean, there are all sorts of different tracks on this album. Really emotional, heavenly, angelic ballads, all the way to cacophonous, freaky ragers, to robotic anxiety attacks, to ominous, strange, dissonant electronic tracks. This album starts off with everything in its right place, and oh my god. This is honestly one of the best album openings I've ever heard. There are these keyboards, and they're so still. They're so calm. They're very monotone sounding, and they sound like it's real hard to describe, but Radiohead's music is magical, because when you listen to those tracks, there would be imagery in your head. It's almost like you're watching a movie, but it's all in your head. Like, it's not a music video or anything, it's all in your head, but yet it feels so cinematic. And this is what the keyboards are doing for me on this track, is that they're so still, they're so calm, yet they're building some sort of imagery. And then we get the chords of the keyboards. They're so strange. They sound really fresh, really bright, like a really refreshing morning. At the same time, there's something really ambiguous about it. There are bits of sourness in the keys that makes it slightly stranger, maybe unknown, but ultimately ominous would be the word. It's so ominous, it's so dissonant, and it's like we are entering a new world, a new dimension, a new universe, and we really don't know what we are about to encounter. And this track just perfectly encapsulates that feeling really well. Again, Thom Yorke's very expressive, vulnerable vocals is fantastic. We get the lyrics, this morning I woke up sucking a lemon, which is a really weird and abstract lyric, but I woke up sucking a lemon. While at first it sounds dumb, but if you look at the meaning of the lyrics, it's like a facial expression where you're stuck on a lemon and it's like, you know, it's kind of weird, but it's fun that Radiohead's messing with stranger and more abstract lyrics. Definitely a reinvention of the lyrics as well, I have to say. And then also there are two colors in my head, which may be a reference to bipolar disorder, or I don't think it's about bipolar disorder. Rather, I think it's simply about conflict in your mind. You know, not knowing which decision to make, and that's simply the idea behind that line. But lyrics are pretty great as well. And then we get these vocal effects, very echoey, the delay effect, and the vocals. They became more and more layered, to a point where towards the ending of the track, it just becomes so layered and it starts to eat itself back up. It sounds very crazy and mind melting. And at first, when I first listened to this track, I thought it's really weird. But I looked at the album cover of Kid A and suddenly I was entranced. I almost feel like I'm in the album cover itself. And I feel like I'm slowly gliding on top of these ice mountains, these icebergs, and I suddenly love this track a lot. And yeah, it's just magical. So the second track is the title track, which is often considered as the worst track on the album. And even though this may be true, but I still absolutely love this track. This track is called Kid A, it's the title track, and it really lives up to its title in that this track sounds like a kid trying to learn and explore the world. It sounds like an infant trying to stand up, trying to walk, and trying to explore the world, because there's just a certain innocence, a certain naiveness to this track that I really enjoy. We get the very strange descending, swerving noises, which are really, really well done. They're really compelling, in my opinion. The pianos, they sound random. You know, the piano keys, bum, 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 bum. They sound really random, but with more instrumentals, they sound like they make sense, and it's just genius. Johnny Greenwood, he's a genius. And then we get the percussion, which is really punchy, bouncy. I love the percussion tones on this track, really ahead of its time. I mean, it's in the year 2000. Apparently, Tom York had visited Björk a few times between the production of OK Computer and Kid A, so maybe that contributed to the fact that the production on this album is so much quirkier. The vocal processing on Tom York's vocals, a lot of people get turned off by this because it's such a weird processing. Tom York's vocals became so much nasal and distorted with the effects, but while I'm not a huge fan of this, but it still contributes to the concept of an infant growing up to a kid growing up to this track. And also in the live versions where Tom York actually uses his own voice, they're really, really fantastic. And we got lyrics. They are ominous, they're dark actually, and I don't throw this word around easily. We've got heads on sticks, you've got ventriloquists, which is probably a jab at the socio-political climate back in the UK in the 2000s, but it's still very concerning. And then standing in the shadows at the end of my bed, so it's about privacy being violated, or being paranoid even in your own comfort zone. So a lot of concepts happening around, and it's all very abstract. Towards the end, we get the very bright synth break, which is really nice, and then we get the drums, and it's just yes, bum 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 bum. The third track, the national anthem, is oh my god, this track. Oh my god, this track is not the national anthem. Radiohead did not do a cover on God Save My Queen or something. Like, they didn't do that. This track is insane. This is basically an anxiety attack. This track is so freaky, it's so intense, and it sounds very dangerous. It's almost like we're being sent to musical, I won't say musical hell, but just it's pure chaos. This track, it's just so chaotic, yet it sounds so great. The bass of this track is killer. And then we get the drums, which sound really raw, organic, and driving. It's very tight and crisp as well. The vocals, while they are sparse, the way they're a little reverby makes them so much more dangerous. There's a hint of paranoia in this track that I really really love. And again, in live performances, Tom York sometimes would go, just breathing really quickly towards the beginning of the track, and it just makes this track so much more intense. The tension of this track, the potential energy of this track, it sounds like this track could explode at any given moment. And I guess this track is sort of commenting on the very corrupted socio-political climate of the UK. And this track really, really captures that socio-political thriller. This track is a thriller in a song. And at the 2-minute 39-second mark, we get these horns, and oh my god, they're so good. Bam, 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 bam. Bam, bam, bam. They're so goofy, they're so clumsy, yet they perfectly matches with the very chaotic and cacophonous sound. And towards the ending, it just breaks down. It just melts. The whole thing just explodes. We get horns and saxophones, and they're going absolutely insane. And also the theremin, the slider, it's so mysterious, it's so freaky, and it's always hanging around in the background like a ghost of sorts. And then of course we get the outro where all the instrumentals quiet down, and then Tom York does his thing, and then Tom York screams, and every other instrumental just explodes, and it's just a spectacular ending to a spectacular track. But do you know what's even more spectacular? The next track, How to Disappear Completely, which is for me, this track is holy. This track is sacred, okay? I don't listen to this track easily. I don't listen to this track casually, because this track holds such a special place in my heart. I don't listen to this track unless I really need to. So a couple months ago, I listened to this track after a very sad incident happened, and I just cried my ass off. It's such a beautiful track, and this track may be my favorite Radiohead song ever. Also one of my favorite songs ever, to be honest. This track is sad, okay? But unlike any other sad song, like this track, the way Radiohead presents sadness is really special. It's really out of the world, because Radiohead is very well known for sad music, but every single one of their sad songs actually sound different, because there are so many shades of sad. There's the worried sad, there's the very ghostly, shadowy, the unknown, the ambiguous sad, there's the very dreary, sort of entranced psychedelic kind of sad. There are so many shades of sadness, and How to Disappear Completely is sad in that it is ethereal, it is ghostly, it is haunting. It is so sad, in fact, this track is almost blissful, because it's too damn sad. And we also get this very thin drone sound in the back, which I believe makes this track even more depressing and haunting. The guitars, they're very sweet, but they sound dejected. They sound like they are cast away. And then we have the lyrics. Apparently it's when Tom York was on a tour during OK Computer, Michael Stipes of REM would tell him to just ignore the crowd and pretend that you're not there. So that's the inspiration for this song. That's not me, and that's the lyrics. And also, I walk through walls, I flow down the Liffey. And they're really, really beautiful lyrics about feeling non-existent, feeling invisible, feeling like you don't exist. And it just resonates with me so much. It hit a chord in my heart. It struck a chord in my heart. And in the second half of the track, we start to get these drums and also these very beautiful, prickly guitars just raining down. And then towards the end, we get the strings. They swell in a very cinematic and powerful way, and Tom York just screams, and it sounds very, very genuine. These screams, it sounds like he really, really needs help. It's true emotional screams. And all the instrumentals, they start to swirl around like a whirlpool, and it just forms this really, really sad storm, actually. And also the way the instrumentals swell and Tom York tries to scream, and then suddenly the instrumentals die down a little bit, and Tom York just sings a little bit for a while, and then the instrumentals return again. It sounds like Tom York's trying to save himself, in that he's trying not to be sucked into this black hole of sadness, and he almost succeeded, but towards the end he succumbed to it, and it's just heartbreaking. So yeah, this track is it's yeah, wow. And then we have Treefingers, which is an interlude. It is basically an ambient track, and yeah, while this track is easily the least eventful track on the entire album, it is still an amazing ambient track. As far as ambient music goes, this track is pretty great. One really special thing about this track is that this track reminds me a lot of waiting music, and that sometimes maybe in between cutscenes in a video game, it would be like a loading screen, and it would be like, oh no, what's gonna happen next? And you'd see the loading bar, like the buffer, and you'd hear very calm music, which calms you down yet makes you even more nervous. And this is what Treefingers is doing to me, is that it sounds like waiting music, but the more I wait, the more I anticipate. And yeah, the keyboards, they're super processed on this track. They're very stargazy, they're very spacey and sort of dense, and they have different shades. It's almost like I'm watching an aurora borealis, because it has so many shades. And the reason why I love this track, originally I didn't really like this track. One day I was in Texas, okay, in the USA. I was in Houston. I was in a Memorial Park, and it was a sunset, and the sky slowly turned dark, and there were no street lights for some reason, and I just can't see anything but stars. And then suddenly this track plays in my head, and I'm like, oh my god. Up next we have the track Optimistic, and wow, such a great track, such a fantastic track. This track is essentially a rock jam. This is the rockiest song on the entire album. This track is straight up rock. However, what's really special about it is that unlike any other alt-rock songs Radiohead had done, this track is so dense, so layered, it's actually amazing. It's almost like they have successfully transported us into another dimension where every wall around us is just packed. It's just very compact, and it's just very dense and layered. The layers of guitars on this thing and the feedback just creates such a strong, thick atmosphere. It's almost like I'm in a very dense jungle for some reason, especially with one of the lines being dinosaurs roam around the earth, which is another repeated line on a track later on Hail to the Thief, on the track where I end and you begin. Anyways, the guitars, they're very bright and optimistic, like the title of the track, but sometimes we would get these very sour moments, and it sounds arduous. It sounds like it's trying to finish a very repetitive and a very tedious task, yet it's trying to push itself. It's motivating itself. And these guitars, it sounds like they have life of their own. It's really fantastic. And you know what's really amazing about this track? It's simply the hooks and the bridges. They are really, really catchy. You can try the best you can. You can try the best you can. The best you can is good enough. And also the bridge. I'd really like to help you, man. I really like to help you, man. And they're fantastic. The guitar breakdown towards the end. The bass of this track is just angelic. It's eargasmic, to be honest. And yeah, also we have a George Orwell Animal Farm reference in the second verse, which is fantastic. And overall, just everyone singing in unison. It's just really great. And well, not really everyone singing in unison, but it sounds like it is. And also there's a primal edge to this track, which makes it just so great, to be honest. And the cherry on top, a jazzy outro. A jazzy outro. And then we have the track In Limbo, and the transition between Optimistic and In Limbo is near perfect. It's such a smooth, seamless transition. And essentially this track is a very hypnotizing, very mesmerizing track where it's just layers upon layers of instrumentals constantly swirling like we're in a washing machine. And we also get these stuttery pianos in the beginning, just very echoey, very reverby pianos. And it's almost like this track is transporting us into a dream state of sorts. And it's not necessarily like a nightmare, in that there is nothing harmless about this track, neither is there anything all that sweet or blissful about this track. In fact, emotionally, this track is very neutral. And it's almost like we're being returned to our comfort zone. And it sounds like we're revisiting old memories. It's a feeling very, very hard to describe. But it's very interesting sounding. Again, the layers of sounds. It's really mesmerizing. And in the back we also get these white noise, which makes this track even more strange and hard to decipher. It's very cryptic, and towards the end the track just dissolves and Tom York screams again, but this time it's more like a confused scream. Like I really don't know what's going on, yet I'm being caught up in this chaos and this storm, and all the instrumentals, they just wong, 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 and it just becomes very strange, and it just dries up in a very confusing way, and it's such a sonic experience. I really love it, and lyrically it perfectly describes what's going on this track sonically, in that it's about being lost. I'm lost at sea. Anyways, up next we have Idioteque, and this is also one of the more iconic Radiohead tracks. This track is an electronic dance track, and the track mainly is just Tom York's vocals plus Ed O'Brien's backup vocals, and then the percussion, the electronic percussion on this track. They are very punchy, they're very scratchy. We get these video game music-esque percussion and sound effects, and also these splats, and they sound really robotic, they sound really electronic, yet they don't sound outdated at all, and it's just very impressive. They sound very ahead of their time. And then we get the lyrics, who's in the bunker, who's in the bunker, and also Ice Age coming, and it's just like a panic attack basically, because everything is just breaking down, everything's dying, everything's being destroyed, you know. And again, even though this track is very stripped back, if you look at the lyrics and you hear Tom York's vocals and the backup vocals, the vocal harmonies, it's actually a really danceable track, yet it's also very anxious and nervous of a track. Also, we get these warm keyboards. They're really, really warm, and it sort of builds a contrast between, you know, feeling comfortable, feeling cozy versus having a panic attack, which I really love. One of the things I really love about Radiohead's music is that they build a lot of contrast in their music. Towards the end, we get these warped keyboards, and then the beat just breaks down, and it's just amazing. And at the very, very end, we have Tom York repeating, "This is for the children, this is for the children, this is for the children," and it's just very cursed. It's very concerning. It's messed up, actually. Also, if you look at the live performances, you'd see Tom York go crazy on this beat, and it's just a very great performance. So anyways, moving over, we have the penultimate track, Morning Bell. Again, perfect transition between Idioteque and Morning Bell. Perfect transition. And this track is in a very peculiar time signature in that it is 10/8 or 5/4. And this track is horrifying. This track is basically if a horror movie is a song, it's this track. We get these pianos, which are really the tone of the pianos. They're very soft, but yet they're dark. They are horrifying. They're bitter. They're sour, and they're uncertain. And we get the lyrics. Essentially, they're about a divorce, and it's just a very gruesome depiction of a divorce. You know, cut the kids in half. Cut the kids in half. And originally, they wrote this track, and after a thunderstorm, it sort of destroyed the copy of that track, and they sort of remade the track essentially with their own memory. And honestly, this is even better than the original because they somehow remembered how the original Morning Bell sounds and made it into a track on Amnesiac. But I actually love this version so much more. It's so haunting, it's so dark, it's so horrifying. Especially towards the end, the guitars, they're scratching like they're being possessed by demons, and then Tom York just mumbles, he speaks in tongues, and he keeps on repeating, walking, 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 and it's just so possessed, it's so haunted, it's so messed up, it's horrifying. It creeps under my skin. And then we have the last track, motion picture soundtrack, and honestly, at this point, I am already like shocked, like how great of an album this already is. But the ending is just so powerful. This track is where we ascend to heaven, basically. It's so raw. It's a very organic track, nothing freaky. You know, nothing gimmicky. We get these very calm church organs, so raw, they sound so organic, you can hear pedal sounds. And then we get lyrics, red wine, sleeping pills, put me where I belong, cheap sex, sad films. It's a very sad song, it's very depressive. And then we have the refrain, I think you're crazy, maybe, and at the end of the track, I will see you in the next life. So this track is essentially what it feels like to die. And again, how would I know how it feels to die? You know, I'm still very much alive. But for some reason, this track feels so real. It really sounds like what it feels like to die and to ascend to heaven. Because in the second half of this track, when we get these raining piano keys, they're so beautiful and they're so magnificent in scale, the way they sort of move and swim. It's so gorgeous, it's so heavenly, and it's almost like we're slowly being transported to another world, and it's so beautiful and poetic, honestly. And then the chorus vocals, it really brings a tear to my eye, and it also really sends goosebumps to me. Like, I really get goosebumps from listening to this track because it's so epic and so powerful of an ending. And then it quiets down at the end, and then we have a secret hidden track. It's an untitled track where we get a bunch of very vibrant, colorful sounds, almost like we're living our next life, quite literally. We're being born again, and this bunch of sharp, warped sounds, they sound very alien, yet they sound like a sign of life, and it's so beautiful. It's almost like a very dark ending, yet with a beautiful twist, and it's just so goddamn gorgeous. And also, you can interpret this in another way, like, oh, I've died and now I've accepted it and I am now a free spirit, you know. So yeah, overall, I love this album. I know that this album review is extremely long, but I don't care. I just have so many great things to say about this album. This album is so reinventive, it's so creative. This album has no music videos, but it has these blips, and each and one of these blips, they match with their songs so well, and they're just genius blips. I recommend everyone to check those blips out. This album is a work of art. This album is a masterpiece. This album has everything. I mean, very beautiful, haunting, depressing ballads, very noisy, chaotic, freaky anxiety attacks, and very strange but ominous ambient music, all the way to the very powerful and life-affirming ending. This album has everything. It is a masterpiece, and I don't know if any single album will top this album for me. This album holds a special place in my heart. Now, I know that objectively speaking, maybe this album is not the best album of all times, but again, it holds a special place in my heart, and I just love this album so much. This album is a masterpiece. So I don't know what's my favorite track. Probably How to Disappear Completely, and my least favorite is Kid A, even though it's still great. And I'm giving Radiohead's Kid A 10 out of 10. No hesitation, no second thoughts. 10 out of 10, final verdict. So, have you listened to Radiohead's Kid A? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate it? Like if you like it, and subscribe if you want more. And thanks for watching. And of course, I will do reviews on Amnesiac, Hell to the Thief, In Rainbows, King of Limbs, and A Moonshade Pool very soon.